Hi, welcome back to Season 4 of the Tummy Team Journey. I am Kelly Dean, physical therapist and founder of the Tummy Team, and I'm your host. This is the podcast where we talk about how investing in your functional core and pelvic floor strength can actually change your life. So let's get started. Hi, everybody. This is Kelly Dean. Welcome back to the Tummy Team Journey podcast. This is an episode that I have with an online client. And this client is Suzanne from Vermont. And we have been working together for a few months. And she has a really unique journey to share. And I asked her to come on. And I'm so grateful you're here, Suzanne. So welcome. How are you doing?
Thanks. I'm doing okay. And so, yeah, just steer me in the right direction for what you'd like to hear. And it's good to see you.
Yeah, it's always a little nerve-wracking to come on a podcast and talk about like something pretty personal about your core and kind of what's been happening, especially when you have a little bit of a traumatic story. But I really appreciate that because I feel like there's so many people out there that feel like they're alone on their journey and they're not quite sure what to do. So I think the first place to start is to just share a little bit about yourself, share kind of just what brought you initially to the Tummy Team, or just a little bit of your background, or kind of what was going on that brought you in my direction.
Okay. And I will say I'm very grateful to have landed in your direction after what I went through. I am 72 now, and I'm a retired special ed middle school teacher. And I have never been through a pregnancy, so I didn't really know about diastasis or pelvic floor weakness or all from that point of view. And last year in January, when I was about 70 and some, I had a just out of the blue emergency surgery. And going into it, I had never spent a night in the hospital in my life. Really had no medications, no chronic conditions. I did a lot of things for self-care, and was really quite fit and had not had any disasters. And so this situation was a twisted ascending colon that just, they couldn't really give me a reason for it. It just flipped head over heels and twisted this way, and my appendix was up in my upper left quadrant. Incredibly painful. And here I was, having done so many things right for self-care, and just landed in this situation. So yeah. It's kind of a long story, but I did end up having emergency surgery in the little local hospital. And it was, they deemed it successful. You know, I found out later that there's a 50% mortality rate for the situation because people often have necrotic tissue and perforations and things like that. And as it happened, my surgeon gave me this little phrase that echoes in my mind to give me encouragement. And he said, your innards looked like a 45-year-old athlete's, other than this catastrophe that had happened. So he took a bunch of my intestine out, sewed me back together. Thankfully, it was the right side, and I did not end up with a bag. And I told him going in that would be a deal breaker for me. I know people live with them, but that was a tough thing to think about. And so then I had a very tough recovery. It was just, my body was not used to being so filled with medications and chemicals. My digestion and elimination just basically shut down. And I won't go into all the gory details, but it was just like a long process of 3 weeks in a local hospital, and then transferred to a teaching hospital, a big teaching hospital. And, the Western medical system can be very good about like saving your life, which
Yeah.
this did, but they're not so great about either the preparation, which in my case couldn't happen, but the aftermath. And so I worked my way to you and the tummy team in the aftermath. So
Yeah.
let me know if there's anything else you want me to tell about the.
Well,
Um,
I think that you had, an emergency surgery. It was pretty, invasive, and, it wasn't just all the medication, and the fact that it took a while for your intestinal tract to start working again, is also the inactivity because you are a very active person, very proactive person, but also just physically active, and the inability to be active the way you were was also really hard on your whole mental state, right? Like your whole it kind of changed who you were for a period of time,
yeah,
and I think that was also really a big part of things for you.
yeah, I would say even still, it kind of changed my self-concept in a little bit of a way. But it was I went down from my normal weight of around 120, which was, kind of like medium lean-ish weight,
Mhm.
down to 105 by the time I was finished with the month in the hospital. And then I had two infections on top of that, and so longer recovery. And when you talk about that getting out of shape, I really couldn't even walk to the bottom of the driveway and back when I first got home. So
Yeah.
the physical therapy was really I had a few sessions at home, and it was just all about, was I able to get in and out of a chair and walk
Yeah.
across the room? Yeah, which I
Basic
can talk
stuff.
more about that if it wasn't useful for what I needed.
Well, this is the thing that the now that I've gotten into doing abdominal rehab and core rehab, it became pretty apparent early on that in PT school and in all my years of physical therapy, we didn't learn a lot about how to rehab somebody's abdominal wall. And even to the extent when doctors are doing like a hip surgery or a knee surgery, they're very intentional about the muscles they're going through and how they're repairing the muscles after, knowing that those muscles are going to be key for that, surgery to be successful. Same with back surgeries, shoulder surgeries, those kinds of things. But abdominal surgeries are often emergency, life-saving procedures, and I think the abdominal musculature is an afterthought, if any thought at all. They're just cutting in and doing what they need to do. But now that we know what we do about how the core muscles are like essential for everything you do, when you cut through those muscles, it takes some rehab to get those muscles back online. And when you have a lot of pain or you've had such a long journey that you had where your intestinal tract didn't function well, and then you had infection, and then you had another infection, um, all of that stuff kind of leads us into like these protective posturing of our stomach, and careful maneuvering of our abdominal muscles. And most PTs don't even think to do that. They think, okay, they're deconditioned because they had an abdominal surgery. I just need to make sure that they can get out of a chair, walk, not fall over. They get their endurance back. They look at it as a deconditioning situation, which you absolutely were deconditioned.
Oh yeah.
But nobody was really looking at, okay, what kind of injury happened to the abdominal muscles, and how is that playing a role in your GI function, in your posture, in your ability to cough, and your ability to exercise, and and all of those things. And that's what we do, because we do focus so much on the abdominal wall. But I see so many people that have had a surgery, or some kind of traumatic event to their abdominals that have been completely neglected by like physical therapy because, to be fair, we just aren't trained in that. It doesn't need to be that way because it's not that
No,
hard to do it.
it
But
shouldn't be
that's too.
that way.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, if I had known how vulnerable that area was in that way, which I knew a lot about the body and about health and about medicine, but I was not like super well educated about the 4 layers of the abdominal muscles or the linea alba. My surgeon explained to me, well, I just cut your linea alba. You know, he was very proud of like a close to 6 to 8 inch incision that just got the
Yeah.
connective tissue between the muscles, you know.
Right.
Um, it turns out that that's awfully important. That's
Yeah.
connective tissue too. And to have that just severed was, I mean,
It's
you
hard
know
to
me
know.
by now.
Yeah,
I
it's
would
hard to know if
have
there was a better option. There may not have been a better option, but to know what happened and to recognize that requires rehab to heal and to build up that, you know, the strength back and to decrease the scar tissue and to get blood flow into those muscles and all of those things. So, yeah, so um, you kind of were in the hospital, you went, you had several infections, you came home, you were just kind of trying to get things back, um, you know, to some form of normal. At what point did you start looking for support? At what point did you feel like my abdominals are not healing the way they should be, or
mm,
something's off, or there's got to be something out there to help me? What was the tipping point for you?
yeah, that's a really good question. And I was trying to reconstruct the timing of this, and I'm not quite sure, but I know I got back in the swimming pool at the beginning of April. So it was like 3 months after the surgery. And I kind of held off. I said, I'll start really slowly. And I'm not sure when I noticed that I had had a little bit of some puffy areas in my abdomen that I'd noticed, which you later said might be the connective tissue between the horizontal parts of the six pack. And
Mhm.
this is later, but that reassured me. But that was a part that I was worried about for a while. And then I started noticing this tenting where, you know, my just this soft tenting in my belly. And I'm not sure if that was before I went back to the pool or after, but it really frightened me. And I started doing a little reading and talked to a couple friends. And one person, a friend of mine, mentioned diastasis recti. I had thought maybe I had a hernia, which I didn't know a whole ton about, but it was so soft there. I was really frightened because I was a swimmer and very active, and also really didn't want more problems down the line after this thing that I'd already been through.
Probably the thought of another surgery was really terrifying. Yeah.
I started looking at, you know, mesh versus no mesh, and, you know, doing a bunch of inquiring in all different ways. I had another CAT scan, and the surgeon did not see a split in the tissue. He said that he didn't think there was a hernia there. But at that point, I didn't have a lot of confidence in the information I was getting. And I knew a friend who had been diagnosed with, she mentioned to me diastasis recti, and that when she had gone in for PT for it, she had popped a full blown hernia from the physical therapy. And it was big, but she's not a very active person. And she was just shrugging it off. But I was like, whoa, I got to get on this. And so, you know, there was a little bit of a relief that it might be just diastasis, or, you know, instead of a hernia. And I started inquiring all around here locally for physical therapists and whether anybody could work with this. It was such a zigzag to get to you. I
Mm.
started with calling 5 or 6 local PT people who really didn't know. They admitted they really didn't know that much about it. One of whom is an integrative core person, but it's more like gentle work for general. She was very interested in me because she herself has a diastasis, a small one, but she admitted that she didn't really know how to heal it. And so then I went to um, a friend who has a trainer in Oregon who referred me to the book Breath by James Nestor, which is really a wealth of great information. And I had already read it. and I knew I
Mhm.
wasn't a mouth breather. So I was doing some things right. But she sent me to the Fit to Be podcast with
Oh,
Beth,
okay.
flagged a couple of episodes, and I listened to those people. One of them seemed very boot camp to me. Another one seemed very more oriented towards pregnancy. And
Mhm.
but I contacted both those people, got more zigzags, and
Oh,
on and
wow.
on. And finally, the people at Fit to Be actually connected me with your assistant directly to say, because
Oh.
once they heard I was a swimmer, they said, "Oh, okay, you have to meet with Kelly." So that
Yeah.
was an enormous relief to. So it wasn't a big stretch at all for me to say yes,
Yeah.
to that
Yeah,
connection.
swimmers bond together.
Mm,
Um, I didn't realize that that was how convoluted your story was. I didn't realize that you connected to Fit to Be. I'm actually really good friends with Beth Learn, who is the founder of Fit to Be. We connected really early at the beginning of both of our businesses, and we live within 20 minutes of each other, and our kids have hung out together. We go to church retreat together, so we're close friends, and but we do kind of different angles of the core approach. She's more fitness, and I'm more rehab, but we complement each other a lot. So yeah, so the swimming thing I think is important for us to just highlight for a moment, because I am, most people know I am a competitive swimmer, and I swam in high school, I swam in college, and now I swim on a master swim team. And it's it's a lifeline for me in my life. It's a part of self-care. It's a part of just my overall identity, to be a swimmer. And I think a lot of people that are swimmers, swimming becomes part of their identity. And it is something that keeps us sane and feeling good about ourselves. And it's something we could do our whole life, hopefully. That's our goal, is to do it our entire life. So when this all happened to you and it pulled you out of the pool, understandably. I mean, you had an incision to your abdominals, it was major surgery, infections took a while. You're not going to just jump into a swimming pool. But what people might not recognize, and maybe like other athletes can understand this to some extent, I think runners have this feeling. I know my sister-in-law, her horses is are this for her, but like when we're taken out of the pool for a period of time, we don't do well, because it is part of our it's part of our mental health. It's part of our kind of grounding ourselves. It's part of getting our energy out, but also keeping our energy up. It's this whole body experience, that I think that another swimmer really can resonate with. So, part of our initial connection was me helping you safely get back into the pool, and helping what you love about swimming to be part of your rehab process. Because that I know how important that can be. And it's not just swimmers. I help with other people that are passionate about other activities, to help use what they love. Like, even I have a guy that's a big golfer. Let's use the golfing to work for you instead of against you. But I think that sometimes we can, and even as a physical therapist, I can say, okay, we need to hold off on this to do the rehab. And there are times where we have to hold back on something to help build up some strength before we put you into a complex activity. But my goal is to get people back to the thing they love as quickly as possible, and to use that, whatever that activity is, to be part of the core rehab process.
yeah.
And so that was
And
definitely an key
that
for us.
approach was so important for somebody like me, because I just felt like that was one of the biggest things in my life that was impossible to feel safe about, because of some of the things that some of other quote experts had said, was that, oh no, absolutely not, you can't swim. And And I just felt like if there was any way that I could, I really needed to be doing some of that for all the reasons you just said. And so it was enormously reassuring to me that when we did connect, you emphasized that not only was it safe, but that we could work on making sure I wasn't doing anything unsafe and that it would actually help my rehab. And that to me just lifted an enormous weight off of my shoulders and made me feel like, okay, I may actually have a future that feels a little bit familiar to me. And you
Yeah.
know, it was really big. And I did send you some short videos of me
Yeah.
swimming early
Yeah.
on, and really felt reinforced in the things that I was doing right. And then some of the suggestions that you gave me were really helpful. And if I'm learning, I'm the kind of person who, if I'm teaching or learning, that's my happy place too, in addition to swimming. So
Yeah.
that was really, really great to have some tips right away that I
Yeah.
could work.
Yeah, and it was fun, like, I mean, you feel it, and I think when somebody's doing something that they're a little anxious about, a little unsure about, but it's so important to them. And I'm not there, you know, I'm on the West Coast, you're on the East Coast. You did a great job at having just like the lifeguard film your swimming, um, so that I could really see what your stroke looked like, make sure that you weren't doing anything that would be jeopardizing or slowing down the healing process. And then at the same time, because I'm not only a swimmer, I'm a coach, I was able to like give you some swimming pointers
Yeah.
in a way that is going to help preserve your swimming for longer, you know, help with your shoulders, and you know, but also really put you in a place where your core was getting the most benefit out of swimming. And you know, to your credit, you are very teachable. Like I could tell you some things and you do it.
Mhm.
And you know, not everybody has that same kind of body awareness, but you definitely were very teachable and then would be able to come back to me and say, okay, this is what this felt like. And then I was able to say, okay, if you just kind of focus on, you know, this rotation or this part of your catch, it's going to be way more efficient, more effective, and you're going to get more out of it. And I think that was definitely a fun part for both of us because we both love to swim, but it's always fun for me to help somebody be more effective with their swimming and get more out of it. And so so that was a unique um you know, part of your journey. When you when we first started meeting, I was able to have you lay down and do a self-assessment of your own diastasis to get a better understanding of what was really happening, because I think you were feeling a little bit unsupported and lost in your local medical community. So you know, and I think that's pretty common. There's not a lot of people that specialize in this, especially in smaller towns and stuff. You might get lucky, but it's not very common. But I was able to help you get a fairly good understanding of what was going on with your tummy. We're able to look over the video, show you how to do some exercises, but also how to assess yourself and how to kind of be reassessing things as we went. Was that helpful? Did that give you some sense of like, okay, some sense of I trust that I can go to the next step here?
Well, that's a good question. I would say mixed reviews on that because that's one of the things that I feel the most insecure about is that, and the I would say it's the area of being remote doing this that's the hardest for me is that quite often I wish Kelly could just put her hand on my belly and really do it, an objective assessment, because as I've talked with you before about it, I can feel different layers of the muscles. I am very kinesthetically aware, but since I don't have the experience in feeling a lot of diastases, I don't really know how to react to what I'm feeling, and I can tend to get kind of freaked out if I feel it's still open and still deep. And then there are
Mhm.
other times when I feel encouraged, when I can feel my deeper muscles engaging. And I actually have a question about this, and I don't know if it's appropriate for this interview or whether I should save it for a session, but I'm interested in whether the diastasis feeling can be there um, more with just the superficial muscles, while the deeper muscle layers are actually behaving well. Like, what makes the crevice? I don't know how like when you have a real cliff that you can feel.
Yeah.
Isn't that usually all of the layers of muscles, or can it just be that most superficial layer?
So that's a great question. So there's the three main layers of your abdominal wall. The rectus abdominis is that outermost layer, which goes from your pubic bone up to your rib cage, and it's almost like those two kind of strips of muscles right down the center. It's what people will see if they're very lean and have a very developed muscle. They'll see that washboard stomach. That's the rectus abdominis, and that's what people think about when they do crunches and sit-ups because it does flex your body forward. It shortens and it kind of flex your body forward, but it also, when it can be strong in a lengthened position where it flattens the abdominal wall. And so that's the outermost layer. Then you have your obliques, which are the middle layer that come out as a diagonal from your rib cage to the middle and from the pelvis up to the middle, and those kind of help with rotation and side bend, and they also compress the abdominal wall. And then you have your transverse abdominis, which is that corset that starts at the spine, wraps around the torso, connects to the lower six ribs all the way to the pelvis, and then all three layers connect to that white line of connective tissue that runs right up the middle. So typically, a diastasis is when all three layers are kind of separated and pulled apart. And there's a gap that the connective tissue should be thick like bubble gum, not thin like cellophane. Okay. And we all know that bubble gum can turn into cellophane if there's a lot of tension, stretching, and pushing on it. And that connective tissue can get thinner, and then we can have the tenting, or we can have the organs pushing through, or that bulgy little pot belly look, or sometimes like even like an alien kind of popping out. So as we start to rehab the muscles, we're really working at getting that internal corset muscle to wrap around. And as it wraps around, it kind of closes and pulls the right and left side together. And we do this with the breathing. We elongate and exhale and draw that muscle in together, and it can close up that gap. And there's a co-contraction with that transverse where the obliques come with it and the rectus abdominis all come with it, and they all come together and close up. So that's the goal. Now, sometimes when there has been trauma to the abdominal wall, or the rectus abdominis is really overdeveloped, and the rectus abdominis can be overdeveloped from people that did lots of sit-ups, or that they are in a lot of crunched positions from sitting, different postures they're in all the time. So those muscles can be overdeveloped also if they're gripping, trying to protect you, or there could be trauma. So in a case like yours, where we've been working a lot on that transverse coming together, and you can tell when you engage your transverse and check your diastasis, it's way shallower. It doesn't go as deep, right? You can feel the end, right? But you can still feel um, a separation or a gap between those outer muscles. And sometimes that gap between the outer muscles, when it's not as deep, so if you're completely relaxed and you're doing your diastasis check, your fingers feel like they sink a little bit deeper than if you do a belly breath, you engage your transverse, the gap is smaller, and it's a little less deep. Is that correct
I
for
think
you?
so. It
Yeah.
changes a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some variations, which we can talk about that in a second. But so sometimes the rectus abdominis is hypertonic. It's like it's almost I don't know, this isn't the best word, but it's almost knotted up. It's almost kind of two like strips that are really firm on the side, which can really make that the gap between it a little bit more of a crevice. And so in that case, our goal is to really start to release and relax the outermost muscles. And we do that with a series of, we could do that with some massage up and down the borders of that. We could do that with some counter pressure on those muscles as we're engaging the transverse. There's also some stretches we can do for the abdominal wall, which seems really scary, but there's often a muscle imbalance. The external muscles are easier to feel and easier to move on our body. The deeper the muscles, they're harder to feel, harder to activate, right? The deeper muscles are more slow twitch muscle fibers. The more superficial muscles are more fast twitch muscle fibers. So it's easier for our external muscles to be helpful, and try to help. But without that balance between all three in the abdominal wall, it's hard for the DR to fully heal and balance out
Mm.
and get better. It is getting better. The transverse coming together is the most essential step to it. I have had times where I can feel when I'm assessing somebody, I can feel um, how firm the borders are. And I go through and I do some abdominal massage, and I might check them before the abdominal massage, and it's like 2.5 fingers and medium to deep. And I do the abdominal massage, and it's 1.5 fingers and shallow afterwards, because the muscles just stop pulling
Mm.
and release. So now the connective tissue is in a less stretched, pushed out position, because those muscles are pulling. The connection of the two kind of ropey muscles down the sides are pulling on that connective tissue, which can keep it from healing. I most see this in clients that are like my heavy weight trainers, heavy bodybuilders, or have had an abdominal surgery where they cut right down the linea albia.
Mm. Okay. So it's not totally unexpected with somebody like me who I've never been a weightlifter, but
No,
yeah,
but the
yeah,
that's the reaction of those muscles are trying to heal, and there's some tension being put on that. Um, and I think it's important to talk about the fact that, yes, I can't put my hands on you, and my job to some extent is to teach you what you're feeling and to help you be an owner of your own body. And the fluctuations from time to time come in a natural healing process, but also come with different hormones in our body, stress hormones, just normal hormones that are going through our body. There's some laxity at times, and also can happen with hydration and dehydration. There can be a fluctuation that kind of comes up and down. So I try to help people not get too panicky on the up and down. It's kind of like if you're, weighing yourself and you weigh every day, there's a normal up and down, but we're looking for like a general trend in a certain direction of things getting
yeah,
better. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you. That education is so helpful, and uh, I do want to say something about that to listeners, in that, my story is not one of like a magic wand just fixing it all at once. And there are ups and downs, and there are, days when I feel really encouraged and other days when I feel more discouraged. But that, I think, as you say, the general trend is better and better. And, when you say better, it doesn't necessarily mean all better, but it's
Right.
so but it's so worth doing, because the other option, I think, if you do nothing, when you have the kind of injury I had, if you do nothing, then I think I would be looking towards a future with more problems and more complications. And that's one of the main things that I really care about, in addition to getting back in the pool and sort of getting my mojo back, is not having to have a repeat disaster. And that one was enough for one lifetime. It was like,
Yeah. Super
and
scary.
so even if I were to like hold steady where I am now and feel pretty secure in that holding steady, that would be a much better place than I was a year ago. Absolutely.
Yeah. And your journey has been, not like we follow the same, like, general path of rehab. We get you aware of where your transverse abdomen is, educate you on what diastasis is, eliminate things that were pushing out and pulling apart your abdominal wall, work on the belly breath, the transverse. We also added some stretches because your body had a lot of protective positioning, right? I call it protective posturing, where you're protecting your belly. It's a little bit of a fetal position. And even if it's subtle, it's enough to tighten up the muscles that need to not be tight for everyday posture, for your digestion, for your, back, like health, but also for swimming,
Hmm.
right? Being able to open, it feels very vulnerable to open and elongate your tummy when there's a big incision there, when there was some infections, where it was very painful and very scary, to get to a place where you can elongate and you can really access the muscle that wraps around and hugs you and supports you. My job is to teach you how to feel those things and how and to give you the confidence to engage in those things. And it is a personal journey in some cases. In your situation, you didn't do the online work rehab courses. We just did e-sessions, right?
Yep.
We just worked one-on-one, over, like I would see you and then maybe I see you a week later, and then maybe I see you 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later. And we kind of have, depending on what you're working on and how confident you feel to work independently for a bit, and then we'll kind of circle back and help with the next step of something.
Yep.
And I feel like that cadence has been variable but really appropriate for you, because sometimes we're like, okay, I'm going to work on this and I want to come back next week and talk to you about it. And sometimes it's like, oh, I can tell I'm going to need to work on that for a couple of weeks before we
Right.
circle back, you know?
Yep. And I think that I needed the really nuanced approach of the one-to-one sessions right away, because so much energy had built up towards really needing the help, that for
Yeah.
me to go through the online videos and try to pull out what was appropriate for my situation would have been another kind of frustrating thing. But just now I have joined the membership, and I'm kind of feeling like, in the spirit of keeping learning whatever little tidbits I can get, or
Yeah.
sometimes it might be an aha moment. I had one last night of how you were talking about keeping that core engaged while moving other parts of the body. And I thought, oh yeah, that is a really important piece. And it's a different kind of movement than with swimming and keeping the core engaged, because you're moving other parts of the body vigorously. You're
Right.
really engaging. But to stand and engage the core, and then move the arms in a wafting kind of way, I thought, oh, that's a completely different tidbit that I can play with. And so I think now I'm more geared towards benefiting from the online programming. But
Yeah. Well,
I
because we
really
kinda
needed
got
that.
you out of the crisis, and we did some of that, specific rehab that was, I think you would've, like, I mean, done pretty good with the step-by-step rehab process, but I think you had already kind of, done so much self investigation, and you had so many questions, and it was just nice to be able to have somebody to answer your questions. And
Yeah.
and I sensed that right away, and I was like, this is the way we need to go with you, because I didn't want you to feel like I'm going to watch a video and now I've got 10 questions and I'm going to email her and then I'm going to email back and then I'm going to email back. And we do some of that, which is fine, but this is just so much easier, for somebody that has a lot of questions, has a unique situation, has been already on a little bit of a traumatic journey. But now I'm excited that you are on the membership, because there are so many, like you said, there's like so many like little tidbits. And now that you can kind of tweak some things. You can add, oh, I'm going to look at this part of it. I'm going to look at this part of it, because our goal is for people to have strong core for their life, for all the parts of their life. And now that you're not, I mean, you're still rehabbing, but now that you're not in that acute stage of rehabbing, all of these other pieces of the puzzle are actually going to complement your rehab process really well, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like I share the story of my healing. Like I had a 6 finger wide diastasis, and just eliminating all the sit-ups that I was doing and sitting up and breathing, I went from a 6 to a 3 in like 3 weeks, and then I went from a 3 to a 2 over the next probably 6 weeks of doing some other stuff. And then I was stuck at a 2 for a long time. And I started swimming and I started doing all this stuff. And I really believe that swimming is the piece that closed the rest of it, because it was more interactive. It was something I was doing on a regular basis. And I wasn't so hyper focused, but I was just living my life with a really connected core, which allowed for the time and consistency that often is required for like a long-term healing process,
Yeah.
Um, so so I like that you're in that place right now.
Well,
Um,
I'd really love it if the thing closes eventually, if I just check it in 6 months and go, oh, wow, it's really different now. But I'm also realistic and know that with that kind of surgery that I had, and at my age, even though I'm a healthy 70 something year old,
yeah,
at my age, I may never have a reasonable looking belly again, or a reasonable feeling. It's always going to be a bit deformed, real, to be truthful.
well,
Um,
it's just interesting when there's an incision and there's scar tissue and there's trauma, there's a lot of unknowns, right? So we're
yeah,
going to do all the work we can. And I just have a lot of faith in the capacity of our bodies to heal. And sometimes when we are consistent, but we look away a little bit, that watched pot doesn't boil
yeah,
situation, you know, things continue to heal, and our body, and we get, while we're living our life. And that's where I want you to get, is that you feel confident doing the things you need to do, and supporting your core, and it continues to heal, while you're living your life. And that would be great.
yeah, yeah. I totally agree, and that's my goal as well, to be concentrating more on living my life than dealing with my post-op
Yeah.
craziness stuff that's going on. And I will say that, to encourage people, um, I think that a lot of times people hesitate to sign up for a membership like this or get these individual sessions when they're not covered by insurance, and they feel like, oh my gosh, out of pocket. I will say that coming into this, I was already used to spending a lot of out of pocket money. That was where I put a lot of my priority and my budget, was to get help that would be preventative and to stay healthy, and to, I was just, not that I liked it, but I was used to it. And so, but I would say if somebody isn't used to it, that to think of it as an investment, because when you look at the problems that are prevented by taking this kind of care with yourself, even at my age, but certainly when you're younger, it's just, to me, it's a really good choice if there's any way to scrape together the money and the
Right.
budgeting to do it. I just think it's, because I think that is a hard part for people. They just say, well, if it isn't covered by insurance, I can't do whatever it is. So,
Right.
um,
Right. We try to work with people the best we can, because I know that obstacle. I feel that obstacle myself with my own care. I'm like, am I going to do that? But uh, I really try to give you a lot for your time.
yeah.
I really
And
try
there's a
to
lot of
value your time. Yeah. Yeah.
and there's a lot of expertise out there that's out of the realm of Western medical system structure. And I just think that, that I just want to put in a pitch
Partly
for that.
because the structure is so limiting to people that become experts, or specialists. It's so limiting to us because we can only spend this much time with somebody. We can only look at one issue at a time. We can't, there's just some of the rules in place are so limiting to somebody that wants to look at the whole person and the whole body and be able to allow the client to guide the direction of what's important. There's been many a session with you where my most important role is listening to what you're saying so that I am giving you what you need. Not what I think you need, but what you are going to be most successful at. And so, the the current medical, I could go out, do a whole podcast on that, but the whole current medical system and insurance reimbursement system really limits us from giving you the care that we want to give you and you getting the care you want. And so that is why people tend to go rogue a little bit,
Mm.
and say, like, I want to work outside of that system so that I can give better care. Um, and and
And to put it,
yeah,
yeah, to the flip side of the coin is for people who are really good at what they do to work outside of the system as well, so that they can give the care that people really need. I mean, I think
yeah,
that's what you're saying, and I
yeah,
just want to, I really appreciate it, and I want to encourage other people to think about it in that way when they're in a quandary. Because I've heard you say before that people sometimes follow your postings for 3 years before they sign up and stuff, and
yeah. It's a long hand holding situation. I think symptoms need to get bad enough. I think sometimes people are, maybe in a season of life where they feel like their self-care isn't as important as maybe their kids' care or something like that. But they eventually will come. I know, like, in situations like yours where uh I don't want to say you were desperate, but you were definitely determined and motivated to get the right answers, right?
yeah,
um and so that and then to have somebody right there that, like, oh, they know about core, they know about diastasis, and she's a swimmer, sign me up. Right.
sign me right up. Yeah, I mean, desperate is not inaccurate, but I wasn't going to just grab it. I wasn't just going to grab at anything that might be the wrong thing.
Right.
So it was really, yeah, I was both very
Yeah.
discerning and desperate. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
also came, the thing I didn't say in the introduction is that I came into this experience of landing and surgery and all of that as being somebody who really loves being in a body and has a lot of respect and love for being in a body. And so for me, it's never been easy to just put other things totally first. It's just a part of who I am. So
Yeah.
I was really grateful to find a like minded
Yeah.
person who could, kind of meet me at that place.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been really cool. All right. Well, I mean, I feel like there's so much more we could share about your journey, but I feel like we've shared a good amount. And when I always kind of wrap things up talking about, like, what is something that you've learned, through the tummy team or through your journey, maybe it doesn't even have to do with me, that you wish you had known earlier, like that would have, like, changed your perception or maybe helped you. I mean, sometimes we can't always overthink and go back to the past, right? Like, everything happens for a reason to some extent, but I do like to say, oh gosh, if I knew this thing, I would have done this differently, and I feel like that's a good thing to look at for people that are listening too, to go, oh, I didn't realize that. Is there something that sticks out for
Yeah.
you?
I think certainly one of the things would just be I wish I had known more about uh, core anatomy and pelvic floor anatomy. I knew some. I knew it in kind of a general way. And a long, long ago, I knew that crunches were bad and that you could do a sit up by elongating rather than crunching. And so
Mhm.
I had never been abusive to my core in that way, and didn't have problems with leakage or some of the other things. But if I had known more coming out of my emergency surgery, so that I could have been more, if I could have sought and asked for the kind of PT that I eventually found with you, if I could have done it sooner, I might have not even ended up with a diastasis. So,
Yeah.
that I can look at it that way. Like, if I had only known, I saw in my notes from my surgeon where under one exam, he said no hernia. And I thought, why would he write no hernia? That was before I even had the tenting or anything. But I didn't, by that time, I guess I was so exhausted and fraught, I just didn't even ask, but I
Right.
wish I had known more about the whole shebang before, sooner than I
And it's
did.
curious. It's interesting that he put that. The reason he put no hernia is that post-surgical hernias are so common.
Right. He
So,
told me it was
so
50% is what he told me.
at least 50%. At
And that
least
blew my mind.
50%. And you know why? It's because we cut open somebody's abdominal wall and give them no rehab
No.
on how to move. So the only way they can move is holding their breath and pushing out and in knowing that it's 50%, they don't do anything to educate us. They just look to see if it's there. I'm sorry, I'm getting worked up, but this is the exact reason there needs to be post-surgical abdominal rehab is to
Yep.
and if it's an elective surgery or there's some pre-knowledge of the surgery, then we need to do
Prep.
prehab. We need to do some work ahead of time. And that's why, like, in my C-section class, I talk to them, like, if you know you're gonna have a C-section, then let's do it. Or if you know you're gonna have a hernia repair or some kind of abdominal surgery in the future, then do our pre-abdominal surgery course, because what you know beforehand is so important. Obviously, in your case, there was no way to know it beforehand, but if you had gotten some instruction in the hospital about how to roll in and out of bed, how to cough, how to draw your tummy in, how to start waking up those abdominal muscles, how not to push out when you're having a bowel movement, all of these things that would help you repair and use those muscles better, like you would not have a diastasis
Yeah.
and you would heal so much faster. That
So
should be the standard of care.
it should be, and we could have a whole other podcast about that. Um,
No kidding. I got all
and
worked up.
I'll throw in two other little things that I had as tidbits, and you can cut these out if they're not on topic. But when women have traumatic births, in giving birth, one of my other expertises is in how birth affects the babies,
Mhm.
how they have preverbal issues around birth, and we all have it because our heads are so big trying to fit through that little birth canal or C-section or whatever it ends up being, so that it can also be a motivating factor for women who are doing prenatal prehab, if you call it that,
Yes.
that
Prenatal
they're going to make it much easier for their babies, both physically and emotionally, to get born. So that's the flip side of that other thrust that's in a lot of the work you do. And then also for people who get hit out of the blue with something big like I did, or who end up with a surprise complication, it's really good to do advanced care planning. If somebody else has to speak for us, that's
yeah.
something I do volunteer hat on in my community as I help people write their advanced directives. And I was really thinking a lot about that when I was lying in my hospital bed, still being my own case manager. I was able to speak for myself, but people need, no matter what age they are, they need to have that stuff in place and have had those conversations with their people. That's just a little plug for that.
No, I think that's really valuable, and I love the perspective you give because I think a lot of moms neglect themselves but don't neglect their babies, right? And so when we look at prenatal care, I always say, like, this is going to help you become the best version of you as a mom as quickly as possible because you're going to have an easier birth experience. But I love that how you flip it also, an easier birth experience for you is an easier birth experience for the baby. And birth is a little bit of a trauma for a baby, right? Or a lot of a
Yeah,
trauma, right?
it
That's
can be
why
a
we come
lot.
out
Yeah.
right? You know,
Yeah.
like this is it is traumatic to be pushed through a really small hole and out into the world and out of that safety of the womb. And on the brain and on the head, how that, how that pushing phase goes. If we can improve that pushing phase, and make it less traumatic for both mom and baby, it's just a win-win all around. And that is what we do, that is what we
Yep.
work on. And that
Yep.
other side of what I do. Yeah.
There's a lot of teamwork in a birth,
Yes.
hormonally and physically and energetically and
Yeah.
emotionally. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you shared that. All right. Anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I love talking about this. I feel like it's really important, but I'm,
It's
dot, dot,
good. It's good.
yeah.
And I think that, I love that you are in a good place to talk about it, that it's feeling exciting to you, or like at least positive to you, that where how far you've come. And it's not, I know even in those early sessions, it's very emotional to talk about your journey because it was very scary and very traumatic, when it happened. See you now, very empowered and eager for more information and seeing a positive road forward, is really feels really good to me, and it makes me happy. So good
Well,
job, you.
and I thank you very much for all the support and help in the rehab and the swimming, and yeah, thanks a
Yeah,
lot.
it's a
Yeah.
journey.
We're
All right.
we're still gonna be in touch, I think. It's not
Yeah,
done
we're
yet.
not done yet. We're not done yet. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Suzanne, for joining us. And I hope you guys that are listening, um, are inspired and encouraged, by her story. And I mean, we all have a unique story to tell. But learning about how our body was designed and how its capacity for healing and getting the support you need to get that healing is part of what we do here at the Tummy Team. So if you want to know more about what we do, check out thetummyteam.com and let us help you. All right. Thanks, Susan. Suzanne, I'll see you next time. Once again, thank you for joining us at the Tummy Team Journey. We would love to help you restore your core and be strong for the life you were meant to live. You can get more practical strategies at thetummyteam.com, and we'll see you next time.